Okay. Uh, Thank you, Chairperson. I'd like to start my talk with two things pertaining to this presentation. This presentation was Srijana's presentation, though it was a joint work between us. But unfortunately, Srijana is not well. She has been to the doctor's chamber yesterday. Still, she is not well. She can't speak properly. Also, so and moreover, she is not available online. Also, she is not in a condition to come out. So, at the same time, I would also like to apologize at the beginning that most of my data is in conventional orthography rather than in IPA, which should not have been the case. But since it was prepared by Srijana at one point of time when she was okay, so it was carried on, but we couldn't do it in IPA. With this preliminary note, I would like to begin my talk on agreement in binominal copular clauses in Nepali. This is a joint work between two of us. Srijana is pursuing her research from the university, and currently she is interested to work on different aspects of Nepali as well as endangered languages. So this is the overview of my presentation. Nepali, I'll briefly put an introduction. I'll give introduction to normal, predicates, agreement, and there will be a summary of copular agreement. As well as we run through 11 diagnostics, which I may not go through all in detail, but through a glimpse, and we'll go into the probe and goal mechanism of agree. To introduce, it is essential to introduce Nepali since most of the time Nepali is only considered as a language of Nepal, whereas there are a large number of speakers in Sikkim, Darjeeling as well as in Duars. And we in Darjeeling and Sikkim, this variety of Nepali is a distinct from that of Nepal and it's known as Darjeeling in Nepali way back from 1962. Dahal in 1975 observes variation among social groups and he finds that it is a distinction because of the substratum of the Tibeto-Burman language of the different speakers of Nepali. Later on in 2002, Kharel observes the similar variation and he thinks that it's because of the ad stratum of the other languages. Similarly, one of my students, Nirmal Niraula, worked on these variations in 2015 in his dissertation, MPhil dissertation. Right now he's pursuing his PhD, and he found that there are two patterns of agreement in Nepali, which he calls as Ka class and Kha class. If you look into non-verbal predicates with copular in Nepali, Nepali has got following example. You can see it in the example. Rina Ramriche, Nirmal student was. So this data comes from Srijana. So over here we can see that there is cha ya che as well as ho. So che is your existential copula and ho is your non-existential copula. If you look into this work by Button, Miriam Button, Tikaram Powell in 2002, they have identified at the level of predication also that cha is basically stage level predication and ho is basically individual level predication. Now, if you look into the non-existential copula ho, it can be also be subsumed into four classes, namely predicational, specificational, equative, and identificational. Now, let's look at this example 3, Pem mero sati ho, which is a predicational one, where there is a predicate part mero sati. Mero sati Vishnu ho, so Vishnu is a predicative which is specifying somebody rather than being predicative. So it's a specific. So difference between predicative and specification can be seen in 3 and 4. Similarly, Hem student ho is the student is as a predicate as well as in number 6 Keta is a predicate. So one is equative, another is identification. So these are the 4 different subtypes of non-existential copula. If you look into the Nepali agreement system, what is seen is that intransitive as well as transitive verb agrees with subject in person, number, gender, honorability. Okay, so this is one of the hallmark or typological characteristic of Nepali. Irrespective of ergative marking with the subject agrees, there is an agreement, subject agreement is there. Although, if you look into the data from Darjeeling in Nepali, particularly in work of Dahal, Kharel, and more on work by Niraula, 2015, as well as his later work, we find there is a disagreement in feature value in Darjeeling variety, which makes us different, which makes us also an element of laughter in many places because the variety is totally distinct from the other varieties. If you look at this data, number 7, Madan Bazar Gayo, it's fine. Where there is an agreement with non-feminine and non-honorific in aorist, third person singular. And in Darjeeling in Nepali, you can find Muna Bazar Gai as well as Muna Bazar Gayo. So both these forms are formed. So I have only given one of the forms, which is of Darjeeling in Nepali. So where there is a Muna is a feminine, whereas if you look into it in the agreement, it is a non-feminine marker as in Madan. So there is a mismatch between feature and its value. And rest of the two data in blue, 9 and 10, are from standard Nepali. Now, if you look into an agreement in Nepali copular predicates, what is also found is that NP1, over here we are discussing about NP1 and NP2. If you look into a linear sequence rather than word order or any other, so we are looking into a linear sequence, something that begins at the left hand is NP1 and it follows, and whatever the following noun is, that is NP2. And since we have SOV, so the verb is in the final, so looking into the proximity or beginning of the verb. So NP1 agrees with predicational and equative copular clauses, whereas NP2 agrees with specificational and identification copular clauses in person, number, gender, and honorificity. This is what has been observed in terms of agreement in the copular. So in a sense, if you look into the verbs, predicative verbs, then we do have subject verb agreement. But if you look into the copular predicates, then we find that there is an agreement with NP1 also as well as with NP2 also. So what we call it is, one is canonical agreement and one is inverse canonical copular agreement respectively. So let's look into the predicational copular clauses with person, number, and gender. Ma student who. So here it is first person singular. Timi student, mero priya student how. These are all predicational aspects of it, where the agreement is with the NP1. So it is very clearly seen that ma, timi, u, madan, uniharu, that element, whatever the feature values of there, is being agreed and the verb agrees with it from 11 to 15. And if you look into the equative also, ma, timi ya ma, timi ya u ho, hu ya thie, or timi, yeah, and then I've given it options over hu ya thie. So what all facts shows that is that from 16 to 18 also, since these are equative copular clauses, what we found is that NP1 and the verb agrees with the NP1. Now, if you move to specificational copular clauses over here, just look at here, the difference between predicational and equative is the change of the order in a sense. So if you look at the specificational copular clause, Lokpriya student, ma hum. So nasalization has been made into more segmental rather than suprasegmental because of the convention that orthographic convention is followed. So here the agreement takes place with the NP2, not with the NP1. Mero priya student, Timi how. So the agreement takes place with Timi. If you go back and you will find it the similar for in 12 Timi Mero priya student how in predicational clause. And if you look into this copular specificational clause, Mero priya student Timi how, still the agreement is how. So in the earlier one, in the predicative, it was with NP1. In the specificational, you will find it with NP2. So is the case in 21 and 22. Now, if you move forward and if you look into this identificational copular clauses, again we find the same. Here, again, you, mahu, ya mahu. So similarly, we will find it, the agreement is with the NP2 rather than with the NP1. because this it's not the same. If you contrast this one with earlier one, Yamati Mihu and all, the similar form has been found with 16 as well as between 22 20, and 23 and 24. So what it basically shows in the identification of copular clauses is that NP2 is the core or is the controller, and the target is in the verb. So what I can briefly summarize right now is that NP1 in predicational and equative is the controller, and we do have canonical agreement, whereas NP2 is the controller in the specificational and identificational copular clauses, and this results into two different forms of agreement. Predicational equative kind of agreement, which is also observed in transitive verbs, in transitives also, in verbal predicates, is a canonical agreement where NP1 subject basically agrees, or NP1 agrees with the subject basically agrees with the verb, with the NP1. Verb agrees with the NP1. Whereas in the specific and identificational, the verb agrees with NP2, and which we call it as inverse copular agreement. Now, also let us note, since we are working right now mostly into the non-verbal predicates or copular predicates, NP1 and NP2 are either in nominative accusative case and they are not in the ergative case. So, and this also leads us to make one more claim, which has not been, which has been said earlier also in many of the works. Especially one clear discussion that I remember was with Martha also, where ergative can be licensed in spec ASPI and need not need T layer. So its ergative case can be licensed in this configuration where we don't need the tense layer. And nominative is basically the spec TP. And to further figure out whether we have canonical inverse agreement, or about these other claims also, we ran through 11 diagnostics, which I'll go through very briefly. These 11 diagnostics comes from Susanna Bayers and others' work on how to identify the system in the binomial clauses. So one of the important tests that we have done is post-copular phrase deletion. So predicational one is there and specification. The star at the beginning means it is ungrammatical, and whatever we have given it in within the translation is the intended one. Madan lekhak ho ra muna pani ho. So this sentence doesn't hold, which doesn't make any sense. So we cannot, post-copular phrase cannot be deleted in both predicational as well as specificational. Similarly, what we also found is that post-copula cannot be also deleted. Nirmal lekhak ho ra bhim kavi. This is fine. Similarly, in his specificational also, post-copula can be deleted. Nirmal lekhak ho ra bhim kavi ho. Instead of that, we can also say that we can say Nirmal kavi ho ra bhim kavi. Lekhak ho ra bhim kavi. So we can also look into VP coordination, where two VPs are coordinated, but it doesn't work out. Nirmal lekhak ho ra ramre cha, that's not possible. Nirmal lekhak ho ra ramre ho, that's somewhat ungrammatical. That is what we have mentioned it with it. Similarly, in specification also one can look into the data. So this doesn't work when two BPs are coordinated. Similarly, if you look into the connectivity effects, we found that it doesn't work. Chameko sab bhanda thulo dusman u afai ho. Now again here there is u afai. Maybe I'll discuss it later on in my another talk. But over here, if we put it u afai, that it refers back to Chame himself. Similarly, in progressive reading, ram ma hudaicha. Ram ma hudaicha. That means it's a transformation kind of. It's need to be read in a very specific way. So we can have a predicational one. त्यो नाटकमा सीता म हुँदैछु. Specificational, it's fine. Similarly, subject-oriented adverbs can also be there. Mo astiko salko 20 freshers ho. This is fine. And similarly, in specific, astiko salko 20 freshers mo ho. So as we said that this predictional expression will have different agreement patterns. It has been clearly been reflected over here. Intensifier with NP1. If you put an intensifier, so then it also shows, but not in case of special. Ram afai hamro party ko umedwar ho. That's fine. But hamro party ko umedwar afai ram ho, especially it doesn't work out. Similarly, u afai raja ho in equative it does. Intensifier with NP1. With NP2, it doesn't work in predicational and equative, whereas it works with the specific. It's just a minimal contrast with NP1 and NP2, as I can show you over in the slides. If you look into personal pronouns for tracking NP1, predicational is there. So Sita aile शिक्षक हो तर 3 वर्ष अघि उ student थिइन्. So now it refers back to the it's fine. So what is basically is observed is in the personal pronoun can be tracked back in the this who refers back to Sita. And if you look emphatic focus marker like matre, so we can also have Pem matre doctor ho. Pem only is the doctor. Mero priya sati matre sijana. That doesn't work as a specification. So there is a clear-cut distinction between these predicative, equative, as well as versus specificational and identificational. And with NP2, it works in predicational as well as in specific. With NP2, it works. So Prem Doctor Matre Ho is different from Prem Matre Doctor Ho. So it works in predicational, whereas Mero Priya Sati Srijana Matre Ho, it works in specification, which was not fine with NP1. Mero Priya Sati Matre was not fine. So if I have to summarize once again what these diagnostics and the facts shows that supported by the diagnostics that predicational and equative copular clauses do agree with NP1, therefore canonical agreement pattern is been maintained, whereas specificational and identificational copular clauses agree with NP2 and therefore there is an inverse copular agreement in Nepali. And as NP1 and NP2 are in nominative accusative and they are not in ergative, and as I mentioned it earlier also that ergative can be licensed in spec ASPI and not in T, and nominative can be in spec TP. So now how to account this data, since it was a part of the workshop that we have done with Susanna Baer, we refer to her work, Susanna Baer's and Kanemi Pure 2017, where she defines the probe goal mechanism of agree in terms of probe reduction. So basically what happens, the probe's features are being reduced and probe feature content is reduced cyclically. It is not just reduced but also reduced cyclically. So what will happen, this will give a large search area from which to agree. So probe is there and the goal can be NP1 and NP2. So since the probe feature is cyclically reduced, so it can go and match with either NP1 and delete the uninterpretable feature, or it can match with NP2 and delete the uninterpreted feature. So basically, if you look into the mechanism, agree is basically of match of goal satisfies probe and value of uninterpretable F, that is feature of probe, is valued by interpretable feature of goal. So if you look into it, I have made it as a part of it. So here the T, AGR, is the probe, and where you have two features, uninterpretable deictic features, which is basically the extension of person feature, and you have got uninterpretable participant feature. Here the speaker feature you don't have, since this is the probe reduction. And NP1, which can be first person, second person, and third person, is the goal. Similarly, NP2, and they have got features called interpretable D, which is a minimal person feature, and similarly we have interpretable participant feature and interpretable speaker feature. Now, what happens in this mechanism in Nepali is that in copular clauses agreements with probe features is reduced. We don't. It's 11:30. In predicational equative, which is in nominative and accusative, NP1 has got these features and NP2 has got a similar feature with these values. So what happens that EPP of T attracts NP1 to spec TP, as I have shown it in over here. So NP1 originates at the bottom, it's moved up to above verb, and from there it moves to spec TP. It's because been attracted by EPP. Since NP1 is now closest to the probe, that is with the T, it agrees with NP1, and therefore we will have a canonical agreement. Whereas in specificational and identificational, which are also in nominative accusative, and you do have the similar feature, NP2 is there, and similar what happens, EPP of T attracts NP1 to spec TP. Well, it moves to spec TP is.
Samar, could you please summarize it?
Yes, I am on the probably on the last slide. Yeah. Thank you, Taran. So it's in the EPP of T. NP1 moves to EPP, moves to the spec TP on account of EPP of T. And what happens? That NP1 fails to agree. So there are certain probe conditions which doesn't match. Therefore, it fails. Now, probe to be satisfied looks further. And when it looks further, it finds NP2 with the feature similarly. Therefore, it agrees. So, therefore, you can find an inverse copular agreement. Therefore, these are the two mechanisms following Susanna and Canipo's probe reduction mechanism of agree. We can account these two copular agreement system in Nepali copular clauses. And I would like to acknowledge Susanna, Aisha, Tanmay, and other members of the Nepali gang members in Sikkim University, many of whose names are in the example sentences. And I also would like to acknowledge that this was the part of the work that was presented by Srijana in LISIN 2018 as a part of a BR workshop on copular agreement 2018. And I wish to dedicate this presentation in memory of my friend Rahul Balushu, whom we lost during this COVID period, in the COVID time. And these are some of my references, not in detail. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Samar.